Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today we've got a variety of things to discuss, including a signing, a few more injury updates, and some trade rumors for the San Jose Sharks, the St. Louis Blues, and the Washington Capitals. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. I'd like to kick things off with an announcement. Tomorrow is the 3 months anniversary of the End-to-End Hockey channel. I'd like to thank all of you who have subscribed and viewed my videos, and I hope that you all will keep doing that in the near future. And on top of that, with it being the 3 months anniversary, we have decided to expand. We'll now be doing a video 2 times a week instead of just once. So instead of just a Thursday video, keep an eye out for our Tuesday video as well, starting next week. So remember to keep an eye out for an extra video each week on Tuesday. So now to get into all of the NHL news and rumors, I'd like to start off with a signing that happened recently, and that is that the Nashville Predators have signed undrafted forward Nolan Burke to an entry-level contract. Now, Burke is 19 years old and he hasn't been drafted, so not too bad to get an NHL contract. He had played really well with Sarnia in the OHL last year, putting up a great amount of points, 59 in 64 games, which is pretty good. And he started this year off quite well, getting 15 goals and 24 points in 16 games. So he's doing pretty well in the OHL right now, and I suspect that will probably where he'll stay for the entire season, and he'll probably still need another year in the AHL as well. So he probably won't even challenge for a roster spot for the next 2 to 3 years. But I think he could eventually be a good bottom six forward for the Nashville Predators. He seems like he can be a good playmaking forward in the NHL, and I think he will have to take a little bit of time to develop, probably a year or two in juniors and then a year or two in the AHL. But I do think that in time, Burke could probably get a shot with the Nashville Predators. I still think that's a ways away right now, and for the time being, he should probably continue to be a dominant player in the OHL. Now we go to some more injury updates. There were some pretty big injuries over the past week, and some players were able to finally come back from injury. I'd like to start off with the Detroit Red Wings. Now, the Red Wings were able to get a bit more health here. Jake Walman, who had missed the entire season due to an injury, was able to be activated over the weekend and play his first game back on Tuesday. So it was good to get Jake Walman back. He's a good third-pair defenseman and a pretty big piece for this Red Wings team. I know he's probably got a lot of competition with new acquisitions like Robert Hägg and also Jordan Osterley, but I do think that he could be a decent third-pair defenseman for the Detroit Red Wings this year, and getting him back was pretty good. But also, more importantly, a bigger piece of their offense actually also came back on Tuesday, and that was Tyler Bertuzzi. He was able to be activated off of IR and return to game action on Tuesday as well. With so many guys going down recently, like Zadina and Matt Luff going down recently, like we talked about in the last video, getting Bertuzzi back is huge. It reunites their top line with Bertuzzi, Raymond, and Larkin, and it's going to give them another offensive weapon. The Red Wings have done okay to start the year, but they have been falling off a little bit, so getting an offensive weapon like Bertuzzi back is huge. But it didn't come at no cost, as they did put Elmer Soderblom on IR after they activated Bertuzzi. Now, Soderblom has been a bottom six forward to start the season. Not too big of a piece right now, but he was a good bottom six piece and is a monster of a forward at 6'8". So he is a pretty big physical forward for the Red Wings, and losing him for the time being isn't too great, but I don't expect Soderblom to be out too long. He's already missed a few games due to injury, so I expect him to probably be back within the next week, maybe 2 weeks. So shouldn't be too bad, but getting Bertuzzi and Walman back, 2 pretty good pieces, is going to be huge for the Red Wings as they try to continue their strong start to the season. Over in Columbus, their season has collapsed. They are one of the worst teams in the NHL right now, the worst team in the Eastern Conference, and the injuries continue to pile up for this team. Now, over the last week, they have placed multiple guys on injury reserve, and a lot of them are pretty bad. Blankenberg's going to miss at least a month with a injury, and Blankenberg, he wasn't an established defenseman yet, but he was looking like he would be. He was playing throughout the lineup, third pair, second pair, wherever the Jackets could find a spot for him, and he had done pretty well. So losing Blankenberg for the foreseeable future is pretty bad. Jakub Voracek, who is a good top six forward, a really good playmaker for the Blue Jackets, he's going to be out indefinitely due to an injury. He missed the last game of the Finland series against the Avalanche due to this injury, and he's now been placed on injury reserve. So Voracek's going to miss the foreseeable future. That's an offensive weapon that the Jackets are heavily going to miss. You have Patrick Laine. We know that he missed the first 3 weeks of the season after getting injured in the season opener against the Hurricanes. He's now out for another 3 to 4 weeks due to an injury. Laine was supposed to be a big part of this reason why the Jackets were supposed to take strides this year, and he's missed a whole bunch of games. This is starting to look like last year when he only got into 56 games. So hopefully Laine can recover quickly. He's not going to be out for an extended period of time, but missing him for about a month is going to be hard on this Jackets team. You also had Sean Kuraly, who did miss a few games and was placed on IR earlier in the week, but was activated on Tuesday and did end up playing, so that's good that they got Kuraly back. But on top of that, they placed Adam Boqvist on long-term injury reserve. We've already talked about him being injured, so placing him on long-term injury reserve is bad, but given the fact that he's missed a lot of time already, he could probably come back whenever he's healthy. So hopefully he can become healthy in the near future and help this Jackets team. And then the major one is Zach Werenski is now going to miss the entire season due to a separated shoulder. So Werenski was a pretty big piece of this team, their best defenseman and one of their best players, period. So losing Werenski for the season is horrible. And, I mean, you've got Werenski out, you've got Boqvist out, you've got Blankenberg out on the defense. Voracek and Laine are going to miss the foreseeable future. They're key pieces of their top six. So, honestly, the Jackets' season has gone fast, and with all these injuries, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get back in the playoff race. They may just be one of the bottom dwellers in the Eastern Conference this year with all these injuries. Over in their Metro Division rivals, the Carolina Hurricanes, they are also dealing with a lot of injuries. They recently placed Andre Kasha on injury reserve. This isn't too much of a surprise given the fact that he had missed most of the season due to a concussion. So just giving them an extra roster spot was okay. But since then, they've placed goalie Frederik Andersen and top six forward Teuvo Teravainen also on injury reserve. So not too good for the Canes. Teravainen was doing pretty well on the top line with Aho and Jarvis and was producing quite well with those two. So missing him for the foreseeable future is not too good. I don't think Teravainen will be out too long term, but he will miss some time due to the injury. Anderson is their starting goaltender. I know Anderson wasn't playing exactly like he was last year when he was a force in net, so not too bad, but Anderson can play quite well. I think that he had a bad start to the season. He could still probably turn around his season and still be a really good goaltender, but missing him for the next few weeks is going to be hard for the Canes, and hopefully he can recover soon. But in the time being, that means Antti Ranta and Pyotr Kochetkov will have to man the crease until Anderson gets back, and I think those two can still run a good tandem for the Hurricanes. Then in Florida, it was just one move that happened with their injuries, but it was a huge move, and that was that they were able to activate Aaron Ekblad off of injury reserve. This was huge for the Florida Panthers. They had done really well without Ekblad. They were able to win a lot of games. The offense was a big piece of that, but getting Ekblad really helps them with their defense. I mean, their defense was not really that good with Ekblad out. So getting Ekblad back in the lineup was really important for the Florida Panthers, and getting him back gives them a decent top four and a much better defensive core with him in the lineup. Now, it does give them a little bit more cap problems, as they had to go back to a 20-man roster to get Ekblad under the salary cap, but given Ekblad is the best defenseman on the Panthers and one of the best players on the team, getting him back is huge, and he should continue to help the Panthers with their good starts and should continue to help the Panthers be a top 3 team in the Atlantic this year. Next, we have the Buffalo Sabres, and they were able to finally get one of those top 4 defensemen back. We know that Dahlin had missed time and Ilya Lyubushkin had missed time, but now Henri Jokiharju is finally back. It took him a couple weeks, probably closer to a month, I think, since he's been out, but definitely, it's been a really tough time for the Sabres. They're now on a major losing streak, but given that Jokiharju is back with the Sabres, it's great to see Jokiharju back in the top four for Buffalo, and hopefully he can help the Sabres end this losing streak and continue to help them play like they started to in October. But they also placed Kyle Okposo on injury reserve due to an injury. So Okposo shouldn't miss too much time. I would probably say a couple weeks. But missing their captain is huge. He's more of a bottom six forward, so the production probably won't be missed too much. But he is a big leader in that locker room. So losing Okposo for the foreseeable future will be hard on this young Buffalo team. And they're going to have to try to overcome this lackluster play over the last few games to try and turn the tides on their season. And lastly here, I want to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Matt Murray was able to finally come back. He was activated from long-term injury reserve on Tuesday and played his second game with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Ended up getting the win against his former team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. But getting Murray back is huge. This gives them a tandem for now of Murray and Källgren. They were able to move Pietrzelli back to the minors, and this can be a tandem that they can work with right now until Samsonov is back. So getting Murray back was huge. That goaltending core was pretty bleak. So getting Murray back, giving them a little bit more depth, giving them a good tandem goalie with Källgren should be good as long as Murray can stay healthy. Like I said, if Murray can stay healthy, he's a good goaltender. He just has to stay healthy, and that's been the problem. So if Murray can stay healthy, I think Murray and Källgren should be able to hold down the fort for the Maple Leafs until Samsonov gets back. But important piece in Murray getting back. And then TJ Brodie, who was injured over the weekend, was placed on injury reserve a couple days ago. So Brodie is a pretty big piece of their top four and was playing a pretty decent role before the injury, especially with the injury to Jake Muzzin. But him being placed on injury reserve is going to have to give the younger guys like a Sandin or a Liljegren a chance to step up and help this team. I think that the Leafs have enough on their D-core, especially with Ben coming back and Liljegren coming back in recent weeks, that this defense should be able to hold down the fort while Brodie is out. I don't expect Brodie to miss too much time, but I do think this Leafs team has what it takes to hold down the fort with the players they have in front of them right now to continue to be a good top 3 Atlantic team, and they should still be a good team until Brodie can get back. That's all I want to talk about with the injury news. We now go over to trade rumors, where I have 3 things I'd like to discuss. I'd like to start things off with the Washington Capitals. Now, the Capitals had a decent start to this season. They were around the 500 mark. They were not doing too bad, especially given all their injuries, but they've gotten a lot more injured since then, and they have lost 5 of the last 7 games. And I quite honestly think that this could be the year that Washington finally falls off. The Capitals are looking at a whole bunch of injuries. They got Karlsson back recently, which was huge, but they still have Orlov out. They still have Hagelin out. Backstrom and Brown will probably miss the entire season due to injuries. Malenstein's still going to miss about a month. Wilson's probably not going to be back for another few weeks. So they have a lot of injuries. And given the competitive division they're in, Jersey's taking off. The Islanders look like they're good. The Kings and Rangers are always going to be good. Even I still think that the Penguins have a better chance of getting back in the race than the Capitals do. I don't see that the Caps having a major playoff push this year. I can't see it. They are currently 6th in their division and are only a point up on Pittsburgh, with the Pens having 2 games in hand, and are only 5 up on the Jackets, with the Jackets having 3 games in hand. So currently the Caps are falling fast, and I predicted them to be 7th in the Metro with an under 500 record, and it's sort of looking like that could be possible for the Capitals. Now, I think that given the fact that they have so many injuries this year, and it's a deep draft in the 2023 draft, and they have so many expiring contracts, that it may just be better for this team this year to try and sell off some pieces at the trade deadline and maybe try and do a retool in the offseason. If you look at this roster, besides John Carlson, who is signed long-term and their best defenseman, I don't see them moving him, and Martin Ferravari, who I think is a good defenseman, and given the fact he's a restricted free agent, shouldn't be moved. Besides those 2, the other 5 defensemen on their roster, all UFAs. Trevor Van Riemsdyk has a year left, Erik Gustafsson has a year left. Matt Irwin has a year left. All three are probably third pair defensemen, maybe sixth or seventh defensemen, and are under $1 million. You also have Nick Jensen, who's in the final year of his deal at a cap of $2.5 million, and Dmitry Orlov, who's in the final year of his deal at $5.1 million. Now, Orlov's a good offensive defenseman, Jensen's a better defensive defenseman, but both can play top four roles in the right organizations. So, given the fact that this team is going to need some sort of change in the offseason anyway, maybe they start selling off pieces if they're not doing too well. Even in the forward group, you have Marcus Johansson, who's in the last year of his deal at only $1.1 million. You have Nicolas Aube-Kubel, who they acquired off of waivers recently. He's only signed for $1 million. Center Lars Eller is only signed for $3.5 million for this year. Fourth line forward Garnet Hathaway and bottom six forward Connor Sheary, they're both signed for $1.5 million in the final year of their deals. And Sonny Milano, who has an in-season signing, is only signed for $750,000 and has looked pretty well with the Washington Capitals. So, I mean, you have a huge amount of forwards. I mean, you have like bottom six forwards. You have 5 defensemen, probably 2 possible top 4 defensemen. If I was the Caps and it's starting to look like the season might go south, I would just try and trade all of these pending UFAs, recoup some assets. They don't have too many high-level prospects. They have a couple. They have some decent defensemen like Alexeyev and Johansson, who are probably no more than third-pair defensemen now. And they also have a couple of good forwards like McMichael and Lapierre, who could definitely get into some game action in the near future and have prominent roles. But besides this, they don't really have too much. So if they could sell off a few pieces at the deadline or closer around the deadline and maybe get a few picks and get a higher draft selection, maybe this might be the best solution for the Capitals. I think if they were to retool, maybe rework that blue line in the offseason, give the younger guys a bit of a chance on the offensive side, and maybe come back next year with a little bit of a younger, revamped team, this team could still be good in the future. But I think for this year, it may make more sense to start moving pieces instead of trying to acquire forward and try and make a playoff push, because they're so injured right now. I think moving pieces right now is the smartest move. Next, I want to go over to the St. Louis Blues. Now, for the Blues, they have been able to turn around recently, but they started off not too well. They had a 3-game winning streak to start the season, which was pretty good. A lot of people thought the Blues would do good. But then they had an 8-game losing streak, and that was really hard on the Blues. But since they've had another 3-game winning streak, so obviously this team is really streaky. But I think the Blues are going to have to be a team to watch out for, because there's a few ways this could go. If the Blues continue to rebound and continue to be a good team, win a few more games, and continue to get themselves back in the playoff race, I suspect that they will probably be buyers and try and refix that blue line. I think the blue line is probably the biggest reason why this team went on an 8-game losing streak. Binnington hasn't played too well, but I wouldn't put it all on him. I think if they can get a decent enough decor, Binnington can play like playoff Binnington like we saw a few years ago when they went to the Stanley Cup, and even sometimes last year. But I think the Blues need another top 4 defenseman. We've already talked about this a little bit. The Blues could look out for a guy like Chychrun or a guy like Pierre-Olivier Joseph. There's a few defensemen around the NHL who could be moved, and I think that if the Blues can improve this team, they would do so. They do have a couple of offensive prospects they could include in a trade, as well as maybe a few draft picks. But I would not be surprised that if the Blues got themselves back in the playoff race, they would focus in and try and get a defenseman. I know they were trying to move Torrey Krug in the offseason. Falk's done okay this year. Parayko's done pretty well. He's their best defenseman. I still don't know why they brought back Nicoletti. I know he's a good player and fit really well in their playoff run last year, but given the fact that he's on the aging side right now, I don't know why they would sign him to a 4-year deal. And this was supposed to be a year where Scott Perunovich came in and really had an impact on this team. So given the fact that he was injured to start the season and is going to be out till the new year, really hurt this Blues decor. And I think that if they can find a way to improve this blue line, which I think is their biggest weakness, I think they would jump on the chance to improve it, and they should be able to try and push for a playoff spot. But if they continue to fall, like we saw with that 8-game losing streak, and they start to lose more and more games, and it starts to look like they might be on the losing end of this season, I would not be at all shocked if they were to trade a few players. They have a couple of huge unrestricted free agents right now in Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko. O'Reilly is a good top 6 center, playing the top line minutes for the Blues right now, and is a really key piece to this Blues team. Was the MVP of the playoffs when they went to the Stanley Cup and won it. So, huge piece for this Blues team. Tarasenko was wanted out of the Blues organization for the last year and a half. He has been really wanting out of this organization. The Blues kept him last year because there's not much trade value, and then they kept him this past offseason because they really do like his production. But I think if the Blues were to start falling off and losing a lot of games, they could be sellers, and O'Reilly and Tarasenko would have to be at the top of the list of players they could trade. There's also a few more lower-end guys, like backup goalie Grace, who's a pending UFA, third pair defenseman Nico Mikkola, who's a pending UFA, Ivan Barbashev, who's a good middle six forward, another pending UFA. So the way the Blues season goes is really going to determine how they handle the situation going into the trade deadline. They're either going to start getting wins and to try and get back in the playoff race, once again be competitive, and then try and improve that blue line to try and give the team another chance at a deep playoff run. Or they're going to continue to play bad like we saw in the 8-game losing streak, fall a little bit farther, figure out that they're probably going to be sellers, and possibly move one of O'Reilly or Tarasenko. But I definitely think that the Blues are an interesting team to watch and are going to be a team to keep an eye on over the next few months. And then lastly, I'd like to talk about the San Jose Sharks. Recently, we have found out that while it's not a pressing matter, the San Jose Sharks would be willing to deal Erik Karlsson for the right price. Now, the San Jose Sharks are not scared to blow up this roster. New GM Will Greer definitely really wants to try and give this team a big retool and maybe a little bit of cap flexibility, given that the Sharks have a lot of high-priced contracts. But a Karlsson trade will be difficult, to say the least. He has a no movement clause, so he would have to approve any trade. He is also signed for the next 5 seasons at an $11.5 million cap hit. So I think that as much as a lot of teams would probably like Karlsson, he's had an amazing start to the season. 18 games, he has put up 10 goals and 24 points, which is amazing. Karlsson's playing like the old Erik Karlsson from Ottawa, but still, I don't see any trade happening before a trade deadline. No team is going to try and acquire a $11.5 million player in Erik Karlsson around the trade line when they have literally almost no cap at all. I know that some teams may be having some injuries and some long-term injury reserve cap relief, but I honestly do not see a Karlsson trade happening before the trade deadline. But in the offseason, it's possible. In the offseason, he'll only have 4 years left, so 4 years is a little bit more to stomach. I think that if the Sharks were to retain $1.5 to $2 million on their salary and make that a $9.5 $10 million cap hit, it might be a little bit more palatable for a team to take on. I think Karlsson is a decent defenseman and showing he's still can put up points, but he's nowhere close to being an $11.5 million player. So that would help the Sharks getting about $9 to $10 million off the cap hit, and would help the acquiring team with a little bit of a lower cap hit. It would still be a difficult trade, and I would definitely not guarantee a Karlsson trade happens anytime soon, not even in the offseason. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And I think that the play of Erik Karlsson is going to intrigue a lot of other teams. And I think that, well, one before the deadline will not happen. It could happen in the offseason, and it will be a situation to keep an eye on. So that's all I want to talk about today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I do a blog, which I will leave in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next week's video when we have 2 videos. See you guys soon.